everybody. We're really excited to be here at DynamicsCon, the event for the community by the community. My name is Melissa Hubbard, and I'm a Teams technical specialist, and I'm joined here with my colleague, Bruce Weaver, also from Microsoft. Today, we're going to be talking about a topic that we've been really excited about in this last year by helping organizations keep on keeping on with virtual appointments in Microsoft 365. So I'll introduce myself and then I'll let Bruce introduce himself and we'll get started. So I come from a SharePoint consulting background, both in the federal government and also in the private sector as well. So coming from that SharePoint background, one thing that excites me is being able to help organizations quickly meet business needs using technology. This includes business process automation, document management, just being able to work smarter and faster and better. So I have now moved into the Office 365 space and focus on all of the modern workplace applications with a special love for Microsoft Teams in my heart. Bruce, you want to go ahead and introduce yourself?
Sure. Hello, everyone. Bruce Weaver. Been with Microsoft for a number of years now, but I've always been a technical specialist, and I've always been on the productivity side of our business. So I cut my teeth in Office, and then I became a SharePoint specialist, and then an Office 365 specialist as we started to take our customers to the cloud. And now I'm currently happy to be spending time focused on Microsoft Teams and the Teams platform. Nice to be with you.
Thank you, Bruce. So glad to have you here with me. So what are we going to talk about today? We're going to talk about a business problem that we were presented with several times once COVID-19 hit this year, unfortunately. So we're going to talk about virtual appointments with Microsoft 365, Microsoft Bookings, Teams, and Outlook integrations, booking setup and configuration. And I'm going to turn it over to Bruce, who's going to talk about automation of booking setup, his secret sauce for getting started with Microsoft Graph and using Power Automate to bootstrap Microsoft bookings. And then we're going to have time for questions at the end as well. All right. So with every great solution, it starts with a business problem, right? And our business problem was COVID-19. So as I had mentioned, I've been with Microsoft only about 6 months, and shortly after joining, COVID-19 hit, and many people were impacted in a lot of different ways. And we had a lot of customers coming to us needing unique solutions to meet the changing environment that they were now working in. A lot of different cities and countries were in some form of a lockdown, a need to avoid in-person contacts, or there was no in-person contacts allowed at all for appointments. They still needed to keep business moving as usual as possible and be able to take care of different customer service scenarios, but needed to either handle it virtually or be able to limit the amount of people that are in in a wait line, needing to avoid that lobby experience where everyone's walking in and waiting in a queue. We wanted to limit the amount of in-person contact as possible. So some of the different scenarios this came up. The first one that we're going to focus on for our demos was financial institutions. So banks, for example, people need to still take care of their banking during this emergency and need to be able to set up appointments and meet with banking professionals and get different services provided. So they needed a way to quickly institute virtual appointments. Another one was an organization that provides tutoring services for children. This is a service that they had done in person in the past and wanted to keep doing it now, especially with schools being closed, and they needed a way to manage that scheduling and relationship between the tutors and the children. Another one is telehealth. Not all doctor's appointments needed to be happening in person. There was a huge need to keep regularly scheduled doctor's appointments on the books. So using a using a bookings tool so you can schedule and then hold your virtual telehealth appointments was really important. And then also another one we found was in the real estate market, holding virtual tours of homes by appointment. So these are some of the scenarios that we came up with, and we're able to quickly provide a solution using Microsoft 365.
Melissa, if I might just add, one of the things that I found interesting about just this problem was, for me, it was pretty easy to understand why people needed to meet virtually, in the context of a lockdown. Their customers are at home and they're also at home, right? So the only way to continue to do business and to reach out and communicate and work with their customers was through some sort of virtual mechanism. So that made a lot of sense to me. What I thought was more interesting was when the bank that we were working with, they came back and said, yes, we absolutely need that. But, we're all looking forward to lockdown ending and returning to, the life that we love. And when that happens, we think there's going to be some new protocols and safety requirements in place. And so we're still going to need the ability to set these appointments so that we don't have people queue up at our branches, so that we can better anticipate them and accommodate them when they arrive. So I thought it was interesting. The low-hanging fruit in terms of the problem is certainly the virtual side. But even as the sun comes out again and COVID starts to blow away, they still have a need for these appointments and structuring how their customers can come in and work with them.
Absolutely. Thanks, Bruce. So just a closer look at some of the benefits that we found, not only customers benefiting from, but the organizations who were instituting these virtual appointments. Some of the customer service benefits were the convenience and scheduling. So the solution I'm going to provide you, it's a very easy way, an intuitive way just to book an appointment quickly. It increases customer satisfaction because, if you can't go in person, the next best thing is to hold a virtual appointment, and being able to do that quickly and to get your needs met are very important. And also the less travel, even without COVID-19. I live in Northern Virginia near the DC area, where with traffic and travel, all types of things can happen, and it's not always convenient, especially during office hours, to be able to go run your errands and get your needs met. Financial benefits, so reduced in overhead, often shorter appointment times, less missed appointments because you can do them from anywhere, and increased revenue opportunities. And so the technical benefits that of course are important to Bruce and I is that this is very simple to deploy, especially once you see the automation piece that Bruce will be demoing. You have everything you need with Microsoft 365. So it's always nice to have, to be able to meet customers' needs with tools they already have. And also, having that security and compliance underneath that comes with all of Microsoft 365 and gives you a lot of room to customize depending on security and compliance needs for the industry. And then also to be able to manage your appointments right in Teams and Outlook, which are tools that we found our customers are in already most of the day getting their work done. So it's not adding another service that they're going to need to worry about. A lot of our customers are already pretty familiar with Teams and Outlook, so it's great that we could keep it right in that experience for them. So I'm going to be doing a demo for you. We're going to go on the scenario that we're a major bank. We have about 30 branches that are part of our bank. Each of those branches have different staff assigned to them, and they offer somewhat different services. Some of them are the same, some are different, and they have slightly different hours of operation and possibly different time zones. So I'm going to go through using the Bookings UI and set this all up, show you how easy it is to make an appointment, and then also add the Bookings app to Teams. And so a lot of the pieces that I'm going to be doing manually, Bruce will then show you how you can do this with automation. Okay, so I'm in my demo environment for Office 365. I am going to search for the Bookings app, open it up. So you probably noticed that Outlook symbol, and that's because this is using Outlook under the surface. So this is opening up to another bookings calendar that I have access to, the Chicago branch. I'm going to be adding a new branch by clicking here. I'm going to enter the name of the branch. Business type is optional. If you choose a business type, the bookings calendar will automatically populate some kind of cookie cutter services for you and things, but you do not need to add a business type. So I'm going to do continue. All right, so my calendar is created. So now I'm just looking at a blank calendar that I'm going to configure and add staff and services to. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the business information, and this is where I'm going to add some basic information about the branch that'll be important. So I'm going to add the address, New York Drive. I could add a website URL, privacy policy, currency, etc. My business logo, and this logo would show up on the bookings page that customers would see. I'm not going to add something now though. And here's where I'm setting our core business hours for this branch. I can set days that the bank is closed, or I could change these regular business hours. I want to note that I'm going to be setting some standard configurations, but some of these can be changed at the service level as well. So now I'm going to go to the booking. I'm going to save this and go to the bookings page. So this is to create the page that customers will be navigating to create their appointment. So you can choose to limit this so that only people from within your Microsoft or Office 365 environment will be able to access it. Or if you need to open it up to the public, you leave this unchecked. So you don't need an account to be making an appointment. You can set some scheduling policies, like how much time beforehand can they book appointments, what's the maximum lead time. You can set email notifications when a new booking event is created or changed. You can set the availability, so that means that it's saying bookable when staff are free. So when I'm adding staff, their Outlook calendar is going to be connected with this calendar so that if they have meetings that are already scheduled, they won't show up as bookable at that time, which is really nice. And now I'm going to go ahead and add my staff. So all the people who work at this branch that are going to be holding appointments. So I'm going to add Deborah, her phone number. And here's where I'm selecting her role. So an administrator, you get access to all of these settings in the bookings calendar to change the times of day they're open, to change the page. You really want to limit who has this level of access. I'm going to make Deborah a viewer, which means she can view and manage her own calendar. You might have noticed a guest right here. So you actually can have someone who is a guest in your environment added as a staff member. The thing is that if you do that, you're going to be missing some of the core functionality when it comes to booking them and management on the calendar, because they won't have an Office 365 calendar in your environment. So it's not going to show them as busy at times that they have something else, on their calendar. So that's one of the major things that would be missing with it, but it is nice to know that it is possible. And here I can set business hours for this person, so their schedule essentially. And save that. Add one more person. Add Joni. The bank we talked with had a lot more staff than this, so this is just adding a few examples. All right, so now I have staff. Let me create services. So, banks offer several different types of services. For example, mortgage services. So here I'm going to add the staff who provide mortgage services, since all of my staff probably don't do that. There's probably just one or two specialties in there. So I'm going to add Deborah and Joni. If it wasn't going to be an online meeting, I could add the location for the meeting here for that service. This is a key piece. You're making this an online meeting, which means this is going to provide a Microsoft Teams meeting link for this virtual appointment. So you're here, you could set some reminders and confirmations. So, you know, they book a customer books an appointment, they get a confirmation email saying, thank you for your service, your appointment is at this and this time. You can set reminders. You can set several reminders, and you have the choice to pick how many days before, minutes before you want to send them. You can customize the confirmation email to say what you want it to say. And you can also have a text message notification sent to the customer as well. And here's where I had mentioned, you can break from the default scheduling policy that we set for the business at the service level. I'm going to go ahead and save this service and add one more. Make this an online meeting. I'm going to add the same people and save. Okay, so now I've added my services. I'm going to go ahead and take a look at the bookings page. So I'm going to change the color here. You can add custom colors in your logo, but I'm just going to pick purple, and I'm going to save and publish. So now I can open the publish page. Notice that I could be sharing this. I could embed this in a website. I could share on social media. I'm going to open that up.
Yeah, that was an important thing. Remember the bank that we shared with, they wanted to take advantage of the service, but they wanted to be able to embed it within their own experience, right? If I recall correctly.
Yep. Yeah. And this is mobile friendly as well. So that's good. So I'm going to select personal banking. So what that is doing is that's going to be filtering out, you know, only the staff that provide that service and their schedules. And so I could choose, if I have someone that I would like to be doing my banking with, I could select them, or I could select just sending to anyone who's available. So I'm going to go for the 25th, and I'm going to choose Joni at 11. Use my alter ego here. And these are optional, but I believe there is a setting you can make these like phone number required. Sorry, I'm having like some, it's not typing. All right, that's my phone number for today. And I'll leave the address blank and book. And now by me entering in my information as a customer, I'm being added to that bookings calendar as a customer. So all of the customers will be stored in one list showing all of this information. Okay, so here I get, this is the next page that I see, like, oops, I scheduled at the wrong time. Let me reschedule, or let me cancel. Let me make another booking. And Bianca should get an email. There we go. Sorry. So here's my confirmation email. I have a personal banking appointment with the time and the Teams meeting. I could manage the booking from here, meaning I could cancel it or reschedule it. And then I'll also get a reminder email one day before this. Okay, and now that I've shown you what the experience is like for customers to create an appointment, I'm going to show you the Teams and bookings integration. So I'm now going to be using the Bookings app in Teams by clicking on the ellipse in the left bar, choosing Bookings. And so this is for people who have access to manage the calendars. This would be for administrators. So they can manage, say someone needed to be able to manage all of the different bank schedules and have eyes on that, they could be doing that right from in Teams, switching between different branches. So I'm going to open up the Brooklyn branch. And let me click. I think I made this for the 25th.
It was the 25th, yeah.
Yeah, so I made this for the 25th, so you can see this. I'm able to see this meeting, and so all of my staff, I can see all of the appointments that they have booked. I can make changes to them. I can create a new booking. I can add staff to my team, and I can even change some of the settings for the bookings calendar here, all right from within Teams, which is great because that's probably where I'm working throughout my day anyway.
And this might be a branch manager or some other administrator, right? Some sort of manager of people that would use this on a daily basis. Is that your perspective?
Yes,
yeah,
definitely.
Yeah.
And even like the organization that wanted to provide the tutoring, they wanted to have an administrator who would be handling all of those appointments and have eyes on to all of them. And so it would be, you know, someone with that role. So basically what I've done is I've shown you how you can create a bookings calendar, add your staff to it, add your services to it, make some customizations to the notifications, who can access the bookings page, all types of different configurations. And I've shown you what it looks like for a customer to be able to book an appointment and what the email message they get for the Teams link is. And then I've shown you the app within Teams used to manage all of the bookings calendars by an administrator. So now, you know, where it went with the banks is, okay, that's really great, but we've got 30 branches and we've got a lot of staff, and that looks like a lot of things that we just did manually. And that's going to take a really long time. And please help us with that. And so that's where Bruce and I got even more excited about the solution. You know, we were already excited, like, you know, they needed this, and we were able to, you know, whip up a demo like that because we just have this service. And then it was like, oh, and we have the graph, and we have Power Automate. We could automate this for sure. So now I'm going to turn it over to Bruce, who's going to show you how we helped with that.
Melissa speaks so confidently. I wanted when the customer had come to us and said, we like the way the service works, but we need some help to kind of bootstrap it into existence. It looks like a lot of work by hand. We weren't sure if we could do it with the Microsoft Graph, but we had a hunch, and we wanted to go do some research and see if it was possible. And lo and behold, we did actually find out it was possible. So I'm going to take you through how we did some of that experimentation, if you will, and how we came up with the solution on this side of things. So one slide real quickly to frame out this idea. So again, just to summarize, right, bookings is cool, but banks have branches and foundations have affiliates and healthcare providers have locations, and they all have lots of them, right? These are big businesses serving many, many customers across their market space. And they all realize that configuring what we just did earlier, configuring bookings by hand is going to be a burden, and the need to help to bootstrap it. So for many of you who've been around the Microsoft platform for a number of years, both on-premise and in the cloud, you may naturally think, oh, I'll reach for something like PowerShell. Surely there must be PowerShell commands where I can do some of this automation. And there are. Those things do exist. The bookings team has published some PowerShell capabilities. So if that's your flavor of choice, you can certainly go down that route. Me, I'm actually not that great of a scripter. I can get through it, but it's just not my expertise. It's not in my wheelhouse on a day-to-day basis. I don't do a lot of it. However, I do have access to this great tool called Microsoft Flow, or Power Automate, as we've rebranded it. And I am increasingly familiar with the Microsoft Graph, which in a nutshell, it does lots of different things. For example, it's paying attention to all of the documents you work on and the mails that you work on, the interactions between you and other people that are colleagues, to help generate insights for how you're working throughout the day. And that's wonderful. That's not what we're going to be focusing on today. We're going to be focusing on how the graph is an alternate way. It's another mechanism to basically tap into the underlying Microsoft platform to build solutions. Whether you're building those solutions in .NET or inside of other platforms that are not Microsoft, or today in the case of Flow and the Power Automate environment. So we're going to use Power Automate and the graph to do this work. And on the right-hand side, you can see a couple things that are going to be at work here, highlighted. The SharePoint. We use SharePoint as a way to hold the data from the bank, their branch definitions, who are staff members, what kinds of services they wanted to offer. We use Power Automate plus Microsoft Graph to basically interface with bookings. So when you look at this little menu of services from 365, these are the ones that we're going to feature. And I'm showing you a little preview here in this screenshot down below where it says Create Bookings Calendar. This is part of the flow, and this is part of the way we're going to interface and interact with the graph. And then I've got this little screenshot here that just shows a little shortcut, kind of a cheat sheet that highlights all of the different functions that are available, all of the different REST endpoints that are available for us to interact with via the graph. So with that said, let's go ahead and get out of PowerPoint and let's get into working with this. So what I would like to share with you first is, as you start to get familiar with the graph, if you haven't spent time there yet, it's all documented out on our documents site. So you can certainly spend time there. But one of the best ways to get familiar with this is to use this freely available tool. You just hit it up online and you can get there. Just search via Google or Bing, whatever you choose, and type in Microsoft Graph Explorer. And when you bring up the Graph Explorer, you will see something that looks like this. You can sign in with your own identity, or if you have a dev test or a development tenant that you're working with, you can sign in with your identity there. And as you look at what's laid out in front of you here, just to give you some examples, I'm logged in as Bianca, the same persona that Melissa used for her earlier demonstrations. And if I just look real quickly, I can click on this little link here and I can get my profile. So when I look at this profile, it's running this command up here. It's saying, I'd like to get this information about me from the Microsoft Graph. And what comes back is information about me, my display name, my given name, my job title, et cetera, et cetera. There's other information in the graph about me. In this case, I want to get my profile. I want to learn a little bit more, double click into me. And now you can see when I run that query, it's the same query we had before, /me, but now I've added a /profile, and I get more rich information that comes back from the graph about me. I can go see what photo I've got inside of the graph as it relates to my identity. I can see my mail. Now, you wouldn't want to get your mail this way, but programmatically speaking, what I'm trying to highlight here is that all of this content that's inside of Office 365 is available for exploration as well as for use in building solutions through the Microsoft Graph. So this Graph Explorer is a great place to start getting your feet wet with what you can do with the graph specifically. And of course, we're going to now highlight how we use this in a bookings context. So let me go ahead and I'm going to pull this up, a little cheat sheet or a worksheet that I put together just for everyone here that's joined us today. I'll make this available. You'll be able to download it afterwards by just looking at the PowerPoint we've got here. But these are a lot of the commands that we have available. So I'm just going to grab this first one here. We'll just get right to business. And I'm going to go ahead and pop this instead. We're not going to look at me anymore. We're going to go look at the bookings business itself. And when I run that query, you will see a response that comes back. And I've got a variety of different branches: Arlington, Baltimore, Boston. Hey, there's the one that we got from earlier today. That's the branch that Melissa had created through the actual user interface, the UX UI. So I'm going to go ahead and hold on to that because this command allows me to look at the entire set of bookings calendars I have. So in the case of the bank, all 30 branches could be represented here by this command. If I wanted to go and drill into one of these branches and look at more information about their bookings calendar, I just have to supply the identity, the ID of that. In this case, it's the email address that's associated with it. So when I put Brooklyn branch at frozenfractals.com and run that query, now I get back more detail about the bookings calendar. what's the display name, the phone number, the email, what currency, the address, the business hours, all of the things that Melissa had shown earlier that would show up inside of the UX and UI. We're seeing those kind of echoed back to us through this graph tool. So we're able to see what's going on behind the scenes within the graph. I'll give you another example. Now that we're actually looking at the Brooklyn branch, there were two other things that Melissa did, or three other things. She also created services. So if I go ahead and run this same interface and I go and get information on services, here's the services that were created. And I'm going to go ahead and show you a little trick. If you do this, you can do what's called an OData filter. And forgive me while I type poorly. And I'm going to go ahead and put display name and ID, and this will just shorten the list of information that comes back. So we are looking at the Brooklyn branch, and I want to see the services that were available that Melissa had created earlier. And you can see now that I put a filter on it, it's a little bit easier for me to read. I can see I have three services. I have the initial consult service, which is default for any service that stands up. You can always delete it if you don't want it. But this is the mortgage services that Melissa created earlier, as well as personal banking. She created them through the UX and UI. I'm now able to inspect them, if you will, and see them through the graph. She created services. She also created staff members. So let's go look at the staff members. And you can see here's Bianca that was added as a staff member. We'll keep scrolling through. Who else did she put in here? Deborah Berger was also added as a staff member. And I think, let's see, was that the only two, or did she have a third one? Joni Sherman also. So these are the staff members that were assigned to the calendar when she created it. The last thing I want to show here, just as we're getting familiar with, well, actually, it's not the last thing. Let me go ahead and put in appointments. So if you remember, she scheduled an appointment for the 25th, I believe it was. So let's go ahead and run. I want to go look at the appointments on this branch. And sure enough, I can go ahead and find the appointment that she created earlier as part of that experience. So I'm just showing you, again, to get your bearings oriented, if you will, around how we're going to utilize this graph. It has all of this rich data inside of it, and we're going to use that inside of our flow when we go to the next step. Now, before we do that, there's a couple things to highlight. One is I've been running these commands with a get verb in front of them, and that's great. It implies that I want to get information from the graph. But all of these graph calls also have other verbs that can be associated with them. So if I want to add something to the graph, I post, typically. If I want to update something in the graph, I typically patch. If I want to delete something inside the graph, I typically delete. And so you can go through, and again, as you're trying to build these, if we wanted to, as an example, create a brand new calendar, right? But let's do it, instead of through the UX and UI, let's go ahead and do it through Microsoft Graph. So I'm going to change this to post, and I'm going to just take off all this extra work we did here. This is our main entry point into the graph. And if I do that, I'm going to go back to my little cheat sheet here. And I'm going to scroll down. I've created all these for you. Hopefully they'll be helpful as you get familiar. Let's create a new calendar, but we're going to create it for Jacksonville. And so if I come back, and now when I post something, I need to supply the variables, if you will. I need to supply the data to the graph that I want it to write. So there's many more attributes that you can supply other than the display name. There's the whole list of them that are well documented. But for simplicity's sake, all I need to get started is a display name named Jacksonville and the right URI here to call. And I'm just going to run the query. And now Graph Explorer is literally going to go ahead and create a bookings calendar behind the scenes. It'll take a couple seconds here, but we should see a calendar pop out the other end. Sure enough, there it is. I see it's been created, and here's all the details about it. Now, if I went over to the bookings UX and UI right now, we'll do it later, we would see a new entry for Jacksonville, and we could work from there. So hopefully that makes sense. We can both read and write to the graph, and there's all kinds of different things that you can do along these lines. So take a look, just as a highlight again. You can create calendars themselves, the bookings calendars. You can create, update, delete new services. You can add staff members. You can add, read appointments. You can add customers. You can publish or unpublish the actual bookings calendar capability, the URL that people can hit that Melissa showed earlier. All of those things are possible by working within the graph. And your best way to get familiar with how they are constructed, right, and how you interface with them, I believe, is through this Graph Explorer. So with that, let's go ahead and turn our attention over to Flow. Now, if for those of you who have worked in Flow, I suspect many of you have if you're joining us here today. Maybe you've worked on it from a Dynamics perspective, but I suspect you're probably familiar with doing orchestration, automation, workflows inside of Power Automate. What we've done here is we've just laid out a very simple flow. There's no branching logic. There's nothing complex about it, but it's very straightforward. And it's basically going to say for a given branch that we're looking at inside of this SharePoint list, I want to get the branch info from the list, and then I want to go through. We're going to initialize some variables. I'll talk about that in a minute. We're then going to perform our first action against the graph, which is called get access token. And I'm going to talk about this at an oversight here today for time's sake. There's lots of great articles. There's some in the resources that I've linked for you folks to download afterwards. But basically, before you can make any call to add a new bookings calendar or to update a member or to read a member, before you can do any of that inside of a flow, you need to get permission to do it inside of the flow. So you have to authenticate to the Microsoft Graph, and you have to supply credentials, and you have to have permissions to be able to execute these capabilities. And so this is the call, if you will. This is the REST call that allows the flow to reach out to the graph and authenticate myself in this case, or the service account behind this, to the graph. And after I get a token back from that, basically I'm going to knock on the door, say I am who I say I am, I have permissions to do this, please give me a token that I can reference in subsequent calls with inside the graph or with inside the flow. So assume I have my token back and that worked well. I then step in and I want to create my bookings calendar. I'm going to run a post just like I did in the Graph Explorer. I'm going to run a post method. I'm going to access the URI here, that bookings business. And now in the body of that request, just like I would have put in the Graph Explorer, I'm going to put it in the body of this action with inside of Flow. And I'm reading in the information from the SharePoint list, and I'm tying it to these particular properties. Now, we'll keep going through there. We get the bookings calendar created. Then we would go and start creating branch services. I read those in from another SharePoint list. Once I get those read in, I go back and now I create the branch services. And here's the example of that. Same type of thing we did in the Graph Explorer, now brought into Flow. We keep moving along. We've created our we've created our booking services. And then we want to go ahead and get staff members. All the things that Melissa was doing earlier by hand, we are now replicating with inside of Flow by using the graph. And you can see down below here, for all of the staff members that come back, for each one I get back, we loop through and we add that staff to the bookings calendar. And we just give you an example here of the display name, the email address, and the role that we're going to put into that. So that's the overarching, flow itself. And then what I would like to do now is let's go look at the SharePoint list just so you have an idea of where we're getting that data. So let me go ahead and move this off to the side a little bit. I'm going to go ahead and grab the SharePoint site. And you can see here, I have 3 lists that I've been working with. This could be in Excel. This could be in some other system that your customer asks you to tap into. The data could be anywhere as long as it's structured. We can get it into Flow. In this case, we chose to port it and bring it into SharePoint. So here's my branches data, which just gives me my branch name and some of the top-level properties, address information. Here's my branch services that are offered. And you can see for each branch, we've got their services: educational planning, mortgage lending, retirement planning, all of those kind of set, as well as other properties that are related to setting up the services within bookings. Here is the branch staff. Again, based per branch, we've got lists of people and what role we want them to play when they are participating in the bookings experience. So we have all of that set up to take advantage of. And then what we're going to ultimately do here is come back and actually now run the flow. So let's go ahead and I'm going to come to branches data. And what I would like to do now is I'm going to pick one. I'm going to pick the Miami branch. That's one we haven't done before. I'm going to come up to automate. And then I'm going to see the bookings branches, the create bookings branches flow that we've been discussing and showing. As soon as I click this, that flow is going to fire off. and hopefully good things are going to happen. So let's go ahead and, before I do this, I'm showing you this for the Miami branch, just for simplicity's sake, and we're actually creating and bringing a branch into existence. But there's nothing that would prevent you from starting or modifying this flow to read all of the rows in from this SharePoint list, the whole set of them, and stick them in an array, and then process for each row of the array the exact same thing that we're doing right here. So for simplicity's sake, we're just going to focus on the creation of one branch, but it's very simple to modify your flow to run the same processes for all the branches that you have in your lists. So I'm going to fire it off, and over on the left-hand side, let me move this window out of the way again. If I can move this window out of the way. There it is. I'm going to run the flow, and then I'm going to go, while the flow is running, let's go look at it while it's happening. Go ahead and, again, move this back up top, I guess. And you can see it's running. This is the flow we just kicked off. We're going to drive into it. Let's dip into it and see what's going on underneath the covers. So I got my item. I got my Miami branch from SharePoint. I've got my branch info. We keep working through it. I've got my access token. I've authenticated to the graph. I've created my bookings calendar. The branch services are underway. They are now done as well. And then the staff members are now being created underneath as the last step. Now, these may take a few seconds. I built in a delay as we were going through the loop. I didn't mention earlier, but it's true. So to be transparent, the Bookings API is currently in beta. And while it's functional, I have noticed that sometimes when adding staff members, I get some false readings in terms of how flow shows error conditions or not. So I put in these delays to help work through that. Ultimately, the ask here is just be aware that the Bookings API is in beta. As that becomes version 1.0, these challenges should fade to the back. But for now, just be aware in case you see some errors along the way. I'll come back to this. It's taking a couple more seconds. Showing an example of a successful one, which we did earlier. And just to give you an idea, here's the successful one all the way through. Everything happens. And at the applying each staff member, you can see these are the staff members that were put in, Nestor and in this case, Grady, and they've been added into that particular branch. What was the branch? In this case, in the previous flow, it was the San Diego branch. So those are all available as part of that. So we'll still wait for this thing to finish up running, and we'll come back to it. Now, one other important thing to highlight, and then we'll start wrapping things up. We'll come back to the demo and make sure it comes out of the oven. But in order for you to authenticate to the graph, there's a piece of work that needs to be done. There's a service inside of Azure Active Directory that allows you to create something called app registrations. So you will need to work with your Azure AD team or your customer's Azure AD team to work on this. But there needs to be an app registration that's created in order for you to work with the graph inside of Flow. And so I have one here today called Bookings. And inside of that Bookings, there's a number of different things. This app registration basically defines some security parameters and authentication information to allow your application to call into the graph. So as an example, here is a password that's generated inside of the secure container. That information is needed to authenticate to the graph inside of the flow. In order to actually execute the commands inside of Flow, you have to have permission to do so. And so inside of the app registration is where you define all of the permissions that you need access to and whether they're delegated or not, and also consenting to use them. These are all defined inside of that app registration. There's lots of articles out on the web that talk about app registrations and how they can be used with Flow. I'll also have one linked inside of the resources for you. But I wanted to make sure I made you aware of it. It's a critical piece. It's a prerequisite to doing this work and having that app registration completed. Let's go back and check our flow. And we should see it has now succeeded. So this is the one we ran here live today. Every step has taken place as we expected, which is great. And now that means, right, we did this for the bookings calendar named. This was for the Miami branch, which means I should be able to go back and move this bar again. I should be able to go to the bookings. Excuse me?
Love those green check marks.
I should be able to go back. Love those green check marks, indeed. So let me go back to the bookings UI and open up a calendar. And if we scroll down here, we should see, there's our Miami branch. This was created all by code. This was all created by Flow and Microsoft Graph. And if we open up that calendar, we can now look at the set of services, right? We just created them. I've got the initial consult. That's the default one that comes with every calendar. Here's the 3 that we generated through code. These were all specified inside of the SharePoint list. We found a way to incorporate them directly into the bookings calendar. Here's the staff that's all been pumped in directly through from the SharePoint list directly through the graph into the bookings calendar. And so this is the way, and this is not a full solution. There's more work to do. There's more things that you can do in terms of what you automate here, but hopefully it gives you an example of how you go about doing this work. You need to get familiar with the graph, and then you need to start feathering in those graph calls into your flows. That's kind of the basic perspectives here. So I want to wrap up this part of the session here. Hopefully that's been helpful. One last thing before I do. As you go through these examples, inevitably you're going to want to delete some of these calendars that you create. You'll be doing lots of testing and kind of getting your feet wet with it. You may think that you can delete an entire booking calendar with inside of the graph. I have not found a way to do it yet. However, you should be aware when you create a bookings calendar, its top level reference is actually a user in Office 365. So if I come look at the active users through the Microsoft 365 Admin Center, you will see Chicago branch, Arlington branch, Baltimore branch. And if I come down low enough, I should see, I have to, I need to just refresh my view. So let me come off. I should see my Miami branch here as well. So let me come on down. Miami branch is right there. So ultimately, if you want to delete a bookings calendar that you've created either by hand or by code, simply come into the M365 Admin Center where the users are kept, and then look for the active users, find the user that matches your branch name, your bookings calendar name, and then just delete it. And then Microsoft 365 will in the background not only delete the user, but all of the scaffolding and structure that represents the bookings calendar underneath it. Things I want to finish off with in terms of stuff I want to share. You will need these things. These are just kind of like reference notes as we kind of wrap things up. So you will need these things to make this work. You will need Power Automate licensing, the HTTP connector, which is used to make all the graph calls inside of the flow, is a premium connector. And in order to get access to premium connectors, you need to have licensing to support it. There's different licensing options available, so you may want to talk to your customer directly or talk better with your customer and their Microsoft account team to see what fits best. They may already have the licensing, or they may need some. Consider the Power Automate per flow plan. It fits the idea of using a flow for this orchestration pretty well. You will also need a service account with a bookings license assigned, and that's for the purposes of hosting the flow, right? The flow itself is something that's an operational asset for the organization, so it's not going to belong to a user. It needs to belong to a service account that's owned and operated by the IT staff, if you will, within the org, the Office 365 staff. And that same service account will need to be able to provide delegated credentials to access the Graph API. And then the last thing, just to highlight here, you'll need to have these permissions delegated with inside of that app reg that I was talking about inside of Azure Active Directory. And again, lots of good examples of how to do this on the web. If you'd like to get a hold of the cheat sheet or the worksheet that I built, you're more than welcome to download it. I've got it linked out here. It's got all of these calls. It's got examples of how to call them. I've got some notes about creating the actual authentication tokens within the graph, and then a whole bunch of resources that hopefully will be useful to you as you continue your journey. And then with that, Melissa, I think...
Definitely want the cheat sheet.
What's that?
You definitely want the cheat sheet. The cheat sheet is very helpful, and it really helps break things down for me and make the graph much more consumable and understandable. So that's a great giveaway. Thanks, Bruce.
Oh, my pleasure. So I think we're at key takeaways.
All right. So key takeaways, hopefully by showing this demonstration, you've been able to see why Bruce and I we're excited about being able to quickly get customers up and going with virtual appointments. One of the things we really want to drive home is that with Microsoft 365, you have everything you need to set this up. It's an integrated solution where people are using tools that they already use probably in their day-to-day, like Outlook and Microsoft Teams, and automation to ease the setup of bookings is possible with Power Automate and Graph. So we really thank you for having us at DynamicsCon, and please reach out to us if you have any questions.
Yeah, thanks for spending some time with us. It's been fun. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Bruce.